Hello and welcome back to the Aviators South Africa Chats. Today we're talking about the most recent Omicron variant travel bans and the impact on the Southern African aviation industry. My name is Kabir and I'm joined in the studio today virtually by Tom and Warwick. So this Omicron variant was discovered in the past week, and within 3 days we had travel bans from countries like the UK, Germany, Netherlands and the USA and others. We had restrictions from other countries requiring quarantine and testing, and a whole lot of other things that are not normally in place. And we know how COVID-19 just decimated the aviation industry back in 2020 with the other travel bans that we had from the same countries. It took years for those travel bans to go out. And so now we leave this question: when is the aviation industry going to recover? So we want to begin with what happens to tourism, because in Southern Africa we have a very delicate tourism sector. It relies heavily on international travelers who come during peak time, but it also relies on the local travelers because they are also highly important to the structure of the aviation industry. Not during peak time. And so, what we need to establish is, well, now we've lost the international tourists and we are on the verge of losing the local tourists. Although the president didn't announce any lockdown, we do have these begging concerns from the public who are saying, I don't want to travel, or I'm scared of air travel in COVID situations. And the truth is, what we've seen is that modern aircraft are actually very effective in getting rid of the virus. However, the issue comes in the transportation to get to the airport and in the airport itself.
I think it's a very interesting position that the government is in because, uh, in terms of the aviation industry, the best they can do is not ban interprovincial travel. Unfortunately, they can't do anything about the international travel that's out of their hands. Um, I'm sure they don't want to say, "Hey, that's not okay. Make us on your whitelist again." But they can't do that because they want to preserve this image of they've already got a bad rap about their COVID response, and they want to preserve their image to other countries. So they cannot do anything about the international travel, and the best they can do is take don't remove the interprovincial travel. And in my opinion, this is my opinion solely, but I think that interprovincial travel banning it won't actually help the situation in terms of COVID, because as we know, the variant that in question is already spread out through South Africa, and it's not even a South African variant as far as we know. So, in my opinion, it won't actually help anything. But the president has hinted in that direction, and people are, as Kabir, as you said, are scared of travel in COVID times.
Yes, I think that's an important point. I think interprovincial travel is really the only thing keeping the industry going at the moment. But on the flip side of it, we've already seen other areas. I know it's not aviation, but SAN Parks, the South African National Parks Association for game reserves, etc., have already have to start refunding customers and actually closing off their tourist hubs. And so that also gives you that hint. And although the president didn't specifically say interprovincial travel, he has a bad rap around the response. And in addition to that, we saw that in the first day, there were already calls from the president to meet with Boris Johnson and President Joe Biden and all sorts of other political leaders. And those calls were really, in my opinion, quite superficial. It was more this response that actually Prime Minister Boris Johnson says that he will possibly reconsider the travel ban. Now, this was on day one of the travel ban. We are close on a week of the travel ban. And we haven't heard anything. Why? Because when they start testing people traveling from Southern Africa, they come positive with the Omicron variant. And although, like you said, Tom, this variant is not South African or Southern African, it was just discovered here. The truth is that because it is becoming widespread here, the cases are coming from Southern Africa, which doesn't help the country's case.
I think the other thing to note is while you guys were saying the international travel ban isn't really hurting the domestic market, which is what's keeping the aviation industry alive, it's a bit of a issue at the moment because half of the domestic travel is coming from international tourists moving around the country and also from people moving around just in general. The one issue with this now is the government has been asking people to be a bit more mindful and careful again. We've been asked and reminded to wear masks more strictly. as we are entering into what would be our fourth wave. So this is it's going to get, I think it will escalate, and I don't think we will have another provincial close just because the economy can't support it. But I think the aviation industry will have a very big dip quite soon. I think the other interesting thing to note is how there was no discussion about it on the European side. It was a very quick move. They just closed everything instantly. All airlines stopped operating except for KLM and Air France, which carried on but then you still had to isolate within those different countries. After that, the chance of you getting into the UK, we don't know yet because it hasn't been 10 days since the ban has been put on South Africa. So it's possible that the UK could red list them at a later stage. Tom?
Yeah, Warwick, you mentioned the UK's response in particular has been very, very quick, and I think a major reason for that is the fact that they're pressured by the population. They've had some issues with international travel, obviously, uh, and I think that the pressure from the population has caused them to be very, um, they've been very illogical in their decisions. Not necessarily illogical, but they haven't thought it through properly. They've done it. They've made their decisions very quickly due to this pressure, which I mean, yeah. So it creates it means that they don't think through the decisions logically, which can definitely harm us and many others.
Yes, I think it's important. A lot of people have been complaining about how rushed the decision was, and that was part of when world leaders started to talk to each other. And it was discovered, well, or rather pointed out by the international relations minister, that actually South Africa is being punished for identifying this new strand of COVID. And South Africa had this responsibility in order to share this new strand to, create new vaccines and restrictions, etc., for the world, to protect the world. But yet we are being punished with the travel restrictions, and that's another perspective in the story. Now, the other important thing is what's been happening to the airlines. So we've seen that British Airways have had to postpone their A380 arrival back into Johannesburg, which is really such a shame because we were really on the horizon. We were moving forward with British Airways. And so that was really upsetting to see that. And we've even seen the effect by local airlines. Besides the airlines operating domestically, we've seen Southern Africa's biggest airline, Airlink, who've had to suspend their Luanda routes. And that's really upsetting to see that even African countries like Rwanda, Luanda, and others are actually starting to also ban Southern Africa. And you'd really not think that that would be the case.
I think the interesting thing is how quickly they've now changed and come back. They've quickly hopped in again and they're starting to bring flights back. I think the one interesting thing is even when they stopped operating the flights, they were still bringing aircraft in, but then not flying them out again. What happens to the aircraft? Are they just sitting on the ground pointlessly waiting, or are they busy getting cleaned? What's the deal? Tom?
Yeah, so well, first I'd like to mention the A380 thing, which I think is a big disappointment for me specifically after seeing the demise of this aircraft. Obviously, British Airways taking it out of operation, and then suddenly we have this hope of them bringing it to South Africa, and now it's been taken away or at least postponed from us. So I think it's a disappointment for me specifically. It's a brilliant sight to see, especially in South Africa. And I think on your note, Warwick, I think yeah, it is a bit of a sticky situation. Obviously, they are not allowed to take passengers back to their country, but I think the only thing they can do logically, obviously, they need these aircraft, and I think the only thing they can really do is just have to disinfect these aircraft and bring it back and hope for the best. Because and I think there's a slight chance that the government might even put these planes on the ground because of the fact that they've been in South Africa, which I think will be obviously a disappointment.
So I agree with you, Tom. And speaking of planes on the ground, we did see that KLM aircraft that came from SA, although they kept flying, were forced on the ground for many, many hours as they had to test the entire aircraft, the crew, the passengers, etc. From those two aircraft from the country, we found 61 positive cases, and at least 20 of those were Omicron variant cases. And so that didn't help this notion that it's not a Southern African variant. Now, the other thing which I think is important is when we tried to open up travel as a country and a continent early this year, before the third wave of COVID in the country, one of the key factors that people were looking for is the vaccinations and the regulations regarding masks and distancing. We know that a key question of people was, well, is the vaccine effective? Is it safe? Does it prevent illness? And we know against current variants that is the case, and that was a key factor to opening up travel. But now there are huge questions that remain for the industry, because right now we're not sure if the vaccine is effective against the Omicron variant, we're not sure if the variant is more deadly, and we're not even sure if it's more transmittable. But there are key factors that scientists are concerned about in the variant. And so as a result, I think it will actually really take quite a long time for us to get travelers peace of mind in order to start traveling back to the country, which is really going to make it a difficult recovery for the industry.
I mean, looking at some of the stats, the Omicron variant seems to be attacking younger people in general, and it seems to be doing it much. It seems to be much more transmissible among them. This obviously just means, as a whole, it's more transmissible because there are more people which are, I guess, open to infection. While younger people were open to infection before, they're still open. Well, they're open even more now, and there's a higher risk. Tom?
I completely agree. I think it is obviously a bad thing that children are more admissible to this variant, but at the same time, I think we can't jump to conclusions about what this variant will bring. I think we can leave it to the scientists and see what they say. I think it's too soon to be drawing conclusions about this variant to say, and I agree with Kabir that this will mean that it will be much harder and will take a lot longer for people to sort of trust the variant and the vaccines.
Yes, Tom, I agree with you, and I think that's why Southern African countries are getting so annoyed and aggravated by these knee-jerk travel restrictions, as they've been known in the media, because there's so little that's known about the variant, and then to pin it on the country that's discovered it, which is actually should be something that should be celebrated, that we've got these scientists who's discovered it and we can work towards eliminating the variant as soon as possible, we instead being treated like the variant is only in your country, and so therefore we're going to put an immediate travel ban on you. And it's caused so many problems for the people in Southern Africa, for people outside Southern Africa, and we've even seen now that the variant has been found in previous COVID positive tests a couple of days before South Africa discovered that variant. And now that we've had it, they're looking back at other COVID test samples and have seen that. And so that just shows you the variant didn't even originate here. It was simply discovered here. And so with that, we really can't tell the severity of the variant. And so we're going to see how the variant plays itself out in the current COVID-19 landscape and how it plays itself out in the December travel peak time in South Africa. So with that, we're going to follow the story closely for you. If you or someone else you know has been infected by these COVID travel bans, send us an email with your story to theaviatorsouthafrica@gmail.com and you could stand a chance to have your story featured in a new Aviators episode next year. Don't forget to like and subscribe and enable notifications so that you never miss out on a new video. We've got brand new weekly content coming out on our YouTube platforms every week from now until the end of the year. So stay tuned, stay safe, and happy flying.